Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Oh, yeah. How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. As always, I am your host, Scott McKay. And before we dive into our topic today, I want to let you know that you can find me all over social media, on X, on TikTok, on YouTube, on True Social, at Scott McKay, and on Instagram and on Threads at Real Scott McKay. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com. More on that later. And gentlemen, check it out. Go to the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook, join our Facebook group, get involved. This isn't another one of those Facebook groups where men get on there and basically just bitch and complain about how bad their lives are and everybody tells them just to, go kill themselves. No, this isn't one of those Facebook groups. We have a lot more fun. We talk about how to be a better man and get better with women on that Facebook group. It's the Mountaintop Summit. You should join us. Speaking of men driving ourselves nuts, either online, offline, or somewhere in between, that's basically the topic of today's podcast. And with me is my good friend, who I've known for over 10 years now, and multi-time returning guest, Mr. Justin Stenstrom from Boston, Mass. How's it going, buddy?
It's going great, Scott. Thanks so much for having me back again, man. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, man. And it's always great to have fellow podcasters on because you're always loud and clear, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I hear you. Same with my show, too, when you come on. It's great.
Yeah. So you've been talking a lot in your practice and on your show about men's mental health. What is it that has caused you to think a lot about that lately? I'm just going to give you the floor and let you riff, man.
Yeah, well, it's I've been talking about it for a while, but I think I sort of rejuvenated the conversation again the last 6 months or a year. But I think really post-COVID, post-pandemic era, it's sort of come back on heavy, especially with men. I mean, it's with everybody, it's women and men, but in the men's sphere per se, there's not a lot of conversation happening about it. As you know, Scott, from being in this for so long, it's like there's a lot of great things about men. There's a lot of weaknesses that we have too. And one of the weaknesses that we have is not speaking about a lot of our issues, a lot of things that's really going on sort of in the background of our lives. And one of those things is our mental health and our happiness. It almost comes across as like a weakness to be vulnerable, as a weakness to show like what's really happening under the hood per se. And so like we tend to hold things in, we tend to kind of hide things and keep ourselves from expressing them. And it really sort of over time just sort of gets worse and worse, like a snowball effect going down a hill. And I don't know, I just sort of noticed it the last couple of years with men that there's a lot of unhappy guys. There's a lot of guys just kind of driving themselves into the ground. And a lot of guys, especially too, it's very like fitting to be on a show like this, where it's a lot of the guys in the dating area who don't have girlfriends right now, who have sort of gone against the grain of, how men have been historically for the past 100 years of like courting women and learning how to talk to women and being more confident in themselves and expressing themselves, and sort of gone the other way of like not wanting women now. Like they push women away. They're almost like anti-woman because of how they've been treated or how they've felt they've been treated in the past by women. And so like it's just kind of like a giant clusterfuck, honestly, of like, what can I do? What should I do? And instead of acting on these things and being a better man and standing up and being stronger against adversity, they kind of tuck their tail in between their legs and, hide from it. And so like it's a vicious cycle. It makes them worse over time. It worsens their mental health, makes them more unhappy, and ultimately leaves them lonely, unfulfilled, and without a girlfriend or ultimately a wife.
Yeah, the irony of everything you're talking about is a lot of it is driven by fear and shame, none of which is very manly. Men do not want to be vulnerable. We do not want to ask for help. We want to rely on ourselves. We want to be self-reliant, and in some ways that rhymes with the all-powerful resilience term nowadays, that if we can't figure it out ourselves, well, then it's just not going to get figured out, and I don't want to act like some kind of pussy and have to ask some other guy for help. Yet famously, the people who are most successful in this life, whether they're billionaires or Navy SEALs, have learned a common lesson. And that's, if I don't know something, I need to go to someone who's got it figured out and have them teach me rather than beating my head against the wall. I mean, that sounds real good if you're doing like a plumbing apprenticeship and you're 19 and some old crusty bastard's teaching you how to work, learning you how to work, boy, right? But, if we feel like we're a little depressed, if we feel like we're just not ourselves lately, if we're beating our heads against the wall, those are things that, like you said, make us feel kind of like we're weak or not so manly if we admit to needing help. That could involve substance addiction. It could involve porn addiction. And you're saying the magic words, Justin, when you start talking about, all right, well, there's guys out there who aren't getting women, or they aren't getting the kind of women they really want. And it's really embarrassing to go ask for help. I mean, you put the round peg in the round hole. How could this be so difficult? I'm just going to descend into porn, tell everybody everything's okay, and then blame it on the women, And that blame is a function of that fear and shame, because we don't want to admit there's something wrong with us or something that needs to be fixed with us. And indeed, even that context of something needing to be fixed or something being wrong with us in and of itself is misdirected, because, we can learn these things. We can gain these skills. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of water under the bridge compared to us, and they can help if we would only ask, right? But we just don't. We keep it bottled up, right?
Yeah, and it just gets worse over time. Like the more we bottle this up, the worse it gets, and the more it wants to explode. Yeah, it's a sad thing it's one of our weaknesses, one of our true weaknesses as men. And I think it's just gotten worse because of the way society has kind of taught us like how to behave. And it's not necessarily like, in one sense, it's good because there's more like, mental health advocacy groups. There's more websites. There's more places you can go and get like online help. In that sense, it's great. But in one sense, it's like the stigma of it is still there. And if not getting worse in some areas of like the men's world, it's almost like the good parts of being a man have shrunken. And like, it's almost like the men who were going to be good, strong men leaders have sort of like gone down that path and done that. But in other sense, it's like the guys who are sort of like in the middle, who had a path or a fork in the road, they could go either way, take this path, take that path. It's like the path that is getting highlighted is the one where this stuff is stigmatized. Whereas the other path, it's like they could have gone down, but they're not going down that path now. And so they're like almost veering away from like where they could have been in life to like this new way of being like unhappy and not getting the help they need.
Well, we so rather glibly titled this episode, How We as Men Drive Ourselves Nuts. And that implies that we're crazy. I think a lot of guys will see that title and go, man, you should be talking about how women are nuts and how they're psychotic. My wife and I are both the poster children of first marriages to psychotic people. So we have been there and done that. But considering the topic that's on the table today, Justin, we're making ourselves nuts by beating our head against the wall, trying to do the same thing over and over again when it doesn't work. And then we just start swirling down this vortex of doom because things aren't getting better. They're getting worse because we're committing, a major sin against Einstein's law of insanity itself, which is, keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. Now, I want you to comment on this, but I would suggest maybe two major factors are contributing to that. Here goes. First of all, machismo. Okay. We don't need anybody's help. We can do this. We got this. That's like the battle cry of the 2010s, right? You got this, right? Everybody's got a coffee mug with it on there. And that's real cute for women who need a self-image boost. But I think we as guys take that seriously. We don't need a slogan. We don't need the coffee cup. That's an expectation that's been ingrained into our psyche since we were children. So let's say abuse happens or a crime happens, and the Special Victims Unit is happy to assign free counseling, mental health services to the women and to the children. But you, dude, we really don't have anybody to talk to you as a man, unless you want to sit in with your wife and we can pat you on the back and tell you everything's going to be okay and give you Zoloft to make you feel better. And guys are like, well, no, that's not what I want. Meanwhile, we as men, if something bad happens in our family unit, we feel like we've got to shoulder all the responsibility for that, be the Rock of Gibraltar and shoulder all of the burden of carrying my family through this difficult time. So what happens then is we start packing on the LBs, we start drinking a little bit too much, and the next thing you know, we've lost our minds. we're going down this path of our mental health starting to slip a little. You know what I mean? So that's the first one, right?
Yeah.
The second one is media. I mean, all the guys in the shows who are weak and vulnerable aren't getting the women. They're the laughing stocks, right? Meanwhile, we watch shows, anything in the Taylor Sheridan universe. I'm sure every guy watches Yellowstone and leaves thinking, well, if I'm not stoic and I'm not kicking ass and I'm not a badass and I'm not unquestioning as to why this bad thing needs to be done and, I've got to be meaner than evil and stuff like that, and I'm, God forbid, not allowed to have any fun, or else I'm going to be like Jamie, the Frito character in that Godfather on the Ranch universe that is Yellowstone, for example, right? You don't want to be like him, the guy in the suit. He's just a crybaby. He's a wuss, He's the villain of the show, basically. You got to be the tough guy who kicks ass, or else you're nothing. And I mean, if anybody actually in real life, and I know ranchers because I live in Texas, right? If anybody actually lived a life on the ranch that was anything close to what you see in Yellowstone, we would all be nuts. First of all, we'd all be dead. Those guys are all in God mode for 5 seasons. But we watch shows like that. We watch superhero universe films and we just feel inadequate. And therefore we say, well, we got to toughen up. We got to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I mean, these are things that are championed on Facebook groups for men worldwide. And yet you don't see a whole lot of happy men on those sites because we're trying and it's never good enough. We're never good enough. And it's no wonder we're nuts, because if you take that machismo and you combine it with a real lack of support for the men who wake up one day and go, wait, hold the phone here. I'm bottled up here. I need to let this out. I need to get this off my chest. I need somebody to talk this through with. We do this to ourselves and we have no outlet for it.
Yeah, I think certainly there's a balance to it. Like everything in life, there's a balance. And I think it's just as bad being a weak man or sort of like a new aged 21st century male, millennial, what's the new one? Gen Z, these younger guys who have no athletic ability, who'd never played a sport in their life and never faced adversity in a real tough sport, wrestling, boxing, whatever.
Soy boys.
Soy boys, you can call them. Yeah. It's one thing to be that, and it's another thing to be the super machismo who's just always trying to like that show Yellowstone. They're picking fights. I never watched it actually, but I know a little about it just from hearing it from a lot of friends and stuff. Supposedly a great show. But there's a lot of fighting. It's like they're living in God mode. Everyone's kicking each other's asses every episode. And
yeah, for sure, man, there's more violence and whatever that little rural place in Montana is than there was in Cambodia in 1974. I mean, it's just, it gets really to be an eye roller after a couple seasons. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to check it out at some point. But so it's something to be said about that guy, the prototypical, badass masculine male, and then the soy boy of today. And there's a balance. It's in between. You got to be more of a balance, because at least the soy boy guy has enough in him to know his mental health is important. He's probably going to yoga class. He's probably, doing meditations and things like that. And then the other guy is doing none of that stuff. But the soy boy go on the street and he can't defend his girlfriend if, someone talks shit to them on the subway or whatever.
Hold on just a second. I want to assert something just really quickly, because I think it'll help the conversation. I'm not sure the soy boy cares. I think he's just happy to be a soy boy. Defending my girlfriend? Why? Move out from my parents' house, stop eating Cheetos, do something other than play video games, have a real adventure, get a job. No. That's for some other crazy bastard, not me. I think that's the mentality there. So perhaps ironically, it's guys who want to make something of themselves. For example, the guys listening to this show and yours, right?
Yeah.
Who are struggling with this. I mean, this is who the show's for. I don't have a whole lot of soy boys in my audience. They don't like me much.
100%. It's a good thing though that they're not as popular. I think that's actually, especially the last 4 or 5 years, you can kind of feel it shifting a little bit, where I think that kind of attitude is sort of dying off and it getting more to the extreme. I don't want to get into politics at all, but in the political world, there's a sphere of extremes. That would be one extreme of the political sphere versus another. And I think it's kind of dying off. People are kind of starting to realize how ridiculous that way of living is, and that the fact you can't live in your mom's basement all day for the rest of your life is actually an effective way of going through life. 30, 40-year-old men who eat Cheetos and play whatever game I don't even know, Call of Duty or something all day.
Ironically.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Versus like, again, but like contrasting that to the machismo man who's like all about just being like super masculine and cutting out his feelings and emotional side and getting in touch with like his inner fucking, peace and actually being a more balanced guy. Like you want to be
fun is not an option for that.
Exactly. Guy. And by the way, those guys don't realize that women actually hate that. Women want to have fun more than anything. That's like one of the number one attraction triggers is fun, being with a man who's fun.
Oh, you bet.
They don't want to be with a man who's always like pissed off and looking for a fight, although men think that's cool. And in a sense, we may think it's cool, but like women don't actually really think that's cool. A woman wants to respect a man. She wants a strong man who'll stand up for her, but she also most importantly, probably of all, wants to have fun and have a good time around that man, which by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this too, Scott, but like in the last decade or so, there was like sort of that hipster sort of, what do you call it? Like a hipster sort of vibe in like the dating, like, I don't know, actually it might have even just been kind of where I grew up in, but there was sort of like a hipster vibe of like sort of feminine men getting a ton of girls. And it was like, why? And like as a man, you always kind of think like, why is this guy getting girls? Or like, why is he get? But it's like because he was just fun. Like he didn't care about being like this super tough guy, strong guy. It was more about putting the fun before like all the other typically masculine, so-called attractive traits that men have that women desire. Again, probably the most important of all is the fun aspect. If you can be a fun man, that's going to supersede all the other things and oftentimes give you a head start off, anybody else you're competing with.
Yeah, I think it was in some part, at least, due to cable television-driven image of a teenage heartthrob, a reprise of what we saw in the 70s with Teen Beat and Tiger Beat magazine for young girls, all these Disney Channel heartthrob boys who were cute guys, but really weren't anything other than funny and cute. They weren't able to protect or provide. I think you had 12-year-olds from 2006 who became 22-year-olds in 2016. And the next thing you know, they're thinking this guy's marriage material.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, here comes Yellowstone on the horizon where Beth Dutton, the female protagonist, I guess you'd call her the protagonist, is tougher and meaner and more macho than 99.99% repeating Navy SEALs out there. So, I mean, what are guys left to deal with? You have, like you said, I think very astutely, Justin, this image of extremes. Either I'm everything or I'm nothing. And indeed, that has been reflected in recent political cycles, hasn't it? Either you vote for my side because we're perfect and my side never does any wrong, or you're Hitler. I mean, there's never anything that's centrist in politics, and there's never anything centrist in terms of how we conduct ourselves as masculine men anymore. So again, we've gone nuts.
Yeah, and it just drives you nuts too. The more you kind of see it in society and culture and movies, all these things, it kind of just reiterates how wacky things are, and also confuses men, especially younger men, like just trying to figure this out, like in their 20s, 30s. And it's crazy too, Scott. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you look at a picture from somebody from like the 80s or the 70s, like say your parents or your uncles or whatever, cousins that were like a little older than you, or like for me, like my dad and like his friends or whatever, you look at people from the 80s, 70s, 80s, and you look at them at like 25, and then you look at people today that are 25. It's like, it almost looks like they could be the kids from today's 25, their parents. That's how much older it looks like these people were just 40, 50 years ago. It's insane.
First of all, both your dad and my dad are good dudes. I've met your dad, had a long talk with him when I spoke at your conference a few years back. He's a great dude. He's got the Boston accent and everything, man. Just a great dude. And my dad too. Great guy. He's accomplished a lot. Funny guy. My mom just loves him to death. Great example for how to relate to women and have a woman be attracted to you for, oh my goodness, 63 years, right?
Wow.
But you're right. I mean, back in the day, everybody looked old before their time. Now you got 60-year-old people looking 35. It used to be a cliche. 60 is the new 30 or whatever. I mean, we really are looking good despite all the chemicals in our food. We've just talked about this recently on this show. That's why I'm kind of chuckling out loud talking about it, because it's something we're obviously figuring out. The generation gap with music and entertainment is gone. I mean, my son, who's 17, will happily listen to music older than what my music is. I mean, music I thought was uncool when I was his age is cool to him because he doesn't have that mental block.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
What I mean? It is. It's really great. It's a better life and a better perspective for him. But here we are left, like you said, as adults thinking either we're soy boys or we're kicking ass. I mean, this is a world where people get on X and call Dan Crenshaw a pussy. You know, the guy with the eye patch from Houston who's in Congress. This guy is actually
SEAL, right?
a real Navy SEAL, but he's not tough enough for them either. You know, you won't stand up to this. It's nuts out there. It just seems like there's no way we as men can win in the confidence, self-esteem game, and therefore we're going to swirl down the toilet with our mental health. I mean, what are we going to do about this? There's got to be a solution.
Yeah, I think it's a complex, not complex and so as far as like it's a hard solution, but I think there's a complex number of options, you know, like every situation is different too. So you might be a little more sophisticated than others. But I think in general, the basics, of course, you know, the eating better, eating healthier, more fruits, more greens, cutting out a lot of the processed foods, the GMOs, all that stuff. You can go right down the line. We can do a whole episode. I think we did something similar to that too in the past.
So you're talking about physical ways
to
control what we put in our body and leave out the things that are hurting us that will help our mental health. And I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah.
Caffeine, alcohol. I mean, I gave up caffeine like I was a freaking Mormon, and they're onto something, man. I mean, I don't hurt anymore. I used to think, you know what? I'm getting old, right?
Yeah.
Not true. I mean, I don't feel so inflamed. Back when you were on the show the last time, you were talking about turmeric supplements, and I've been taking them since. It obviates the need for ibuprofen.
Great.
I mean, you get less inflamed, and, you know, you cut back on the sauce a little bit, and you don't eat the fake food and the carbs and the fake sugar. And the next thing you know, your body literally settles down. You feel younger. And indeed, Justin, your brain feels better. Your psychology feels better. You don't feel like, well, you know what? I'm just going to give up. I'll get fat and old and I'm, you know, over the hill. That's just the way life is. And get this schlep rock mentality. It's like when you wake your body up from that inflammation and you start living right and feel healthier physically, your brain catches up and suddenly those feelings your doctor told you needed Zoloft to control or some other med on top of meds you're already taking, you don't need it anymore. You feel fine. You feel rejuvenated. You feel excited. Yeah, you're onto something there.
Yeah, it's 100% true. And so that's probably the biggest one is the food. The other thing is obviously sleep, which is 7 to 9 hours. Everyone pretty much needs good quality sleep. Yep.
Not junk sleep.
And then, you know, just like a simple thing like working out, like I say, work out 4 to 5 times hard a week. But even just going for a simple walk, like 30 minutes a day, that I wouldn't even consider that a workout, but it's just getting out of the house and breaking a sweat. You should do that daily, 7 days a week.
Here's an idea. Go outside.
Yeah, go outside, get some fresh, like the healing benefits of actual like sunlight. I know whenever everybody bashes the sun because of skin cancer, this and that, which is, you know, can be true, but actually getting just a little bit of sun every day is incredible for your health. They've even done studies though on like the physical movement exercise part, a number of them actually, that exercise alone often outperforms the highest performing anti-anxiety, anti-depression meds. Just exercise alone.
No doubt. Oh yeah. We live in a sick care society.
100%. And they want to keep doing it too. We, you know, one of the silver linings of what happened, you know, in 2020 and in the next couple of years after that was the exposing of just how crooked the pharmaceutical company is and how crooked these big entities are that are really running things in the background. That's one of them. A lot of people were unaware until a couple of years ago, which is incredible that so many people have awoken from that. But, yeah, like that. And then slowly, like I'm not saying to do it. And obviously you have to consult with your doctors, but slowly over time, having less and less need or requirement to be on like these high performing meds that you don't need to be necessarily on. Like you can do this alternative, safer way, like, you know, exercise, eat right, that thing. And then slowly kind of get yourself off these powerful drugs that are actually having a lot of side effects as they come to find out more and more. There's a lot of studies on those as well. The deleterious effects of these things that often can outweigh whatever minimal effects they could positively do for you.
Well, even the maintenance drugs for chronic illness.
Yeah. Immune suppressors, et cetera.
Yeah. Like, you know, your blood pressure meds and your statins.
Yeah.
And even if you're showing any signs of having a little spike in your blood sugar, it's onto the Ozempic train with you. And by the way, you'll lose weight without trying, you know. This is all a bunch of BS. I mean, I agree with you 1,000%. Justin, I'm also going to add at the more core level, I think more and more men in particular nowadays don't know who they are.
Mm.
Their core belief system has never been established. There's never been any need for that in the secular humanist world we live in nowadays, at least in their minds and in their dad's minds, in their mom and dad's minds. So they grow up believing in nothing and don't really understand why they would need to. But boom, when you become an adult, whenever that is, because we don't have rites of passage anymore, right, either. I mean, it's a cluster when you think about it. No rite of passage into adulthood from a childhood where you weren't given any reason to have any belief or any purpose. You're thrust into having hair on your balls and being of drinking age and not knowing who the hell you are, what you believe. And we are so surprised that we don't have a purpose, that we don't have any grasp of who we are, what we should be doing, what we're good at, and what we're, probably not best at, even as a simple baseline. And here we are in adulthood and we're wandering aimlessly. It's no wonder we feel badly about ourselves. We don't even know where we're going.
Yeah. And the other thing too, which you've probably noticed, is everybody's on their phones, and it's like so easy. It's made like all these programs, these apps and everything, major big tech and all this stuff. They know exactly what they're doing. They have the best computer scientists in the world, algorithmic geniuses, all these things to make us addicted to these apps that they have. And so like we're spending all of our extra free time. In the past, we'd be like listening to cool music, like you mentioned before, or watching like these cooler movies, or reading books, God forbid. Now, or like exercising or having fun, like going outside and playing outside with our friends. Now, all these kids, all these younger men, all these, every man, even if you're older, is on his phone in all his spare time. And it's just like scrolling through like Instagram, scrolling through TikTok, watching stupid clips on YouTube. It's like, it's one thing to like watch a video to like learn something, and it's cool. I do that myself as much as I can. When I need to learn something, YouTube's great for that. But it's another thing to aimlessly kind of be scrolling all day long and wasting your time. And if you're a man who's already, unhappy, is slightly depressed, doesn't have a job that they like, doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have like anything to really strive for in terms of like your life and your purpose and what you want to go after. There's no big goal that wakes up and has you like fired up for the day. You're already aimless. Never mind putting this machine in front of you that's the most distracting machine ever conceived in the history of humanity, and then spending all of your extra time on that machine. It's going to leave you even more aimless.
And then we're watching naked girls on said machine, which makes it 10 minutes
exactly.
more distracting.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we get a little excited, or we want to connect with somebody in some way, it's like, oh, let's go watch some porn for, 20 minutes or whatever, and get off that way for a temporary fix, which ultimately leaves us unhappy like an hour afterwards, right?
Yeah, so much for our mental health again.
Exactly. It's like a double whammy. But in reality, it's like we're already so confused, we're already so lost, we're already so aimless. This is just exacerbating the whole problem and making it that much worse. And now you wonder why there's so many guys like walking around for years, like the last whatever years, X amount of years, that have no idea what they're doing with their lives. And they have no idea. They wake up 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and they can't figure out why they're so unhappy and they're miserable in their life.
And not to be missed, the first generation of 20-somethings is upon us who's never known anything other than smartphones.
I know. That's crazy, right? It's insane.
Yeah. Now, you're onto something there, because not only are we, suffering from this nagging mental health deficiency whereby we don't know who we are or what we're supposed to be doing, we're unfulfilled, and yet the food we eat and the chemicals we absorb are making it all worse. We use a smartphone to forget about it.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't even have to have an adventure. I can have somebody else do an adventure and I can watch them and live vicariously. Two things here. First of all, my wife and I watched a cruise ship commercial the other night while we were staring at our big screen. Go figure. And they were talking about, this is the adventure of your life. Dude, it's still a controlled situation. It's Disneyland floating. You're not going out and having any adventure at all. That's Wall-E world, WALL-E world. You're going to lay around and be catered to for a week and go see a show and drive a go-kart around a boat. I mean, great. That is not a real adventure. But compared to watching the commercial for it, actually being on the boat is a massive adventure nowadays. It's demented and sad. The second thing is, I wish I could remember which radio talk show host it was, but I listen to a lot of talk radio when I'm driving. And he said, hey, you want to look like a badass when you're traveling to total strangers without even trying? Here's how to do it. When you're in the airport lounge, instead of, poking your nose in your smartphone, start reading a book. It doesn't matter what book you're reading. Everybody's going to look at you and go, wow, that person's really smart and successful. He goes, now you could take your smartphone and hide it behind the cover of the book. Just make sure the, book is, the cover's, straight up instead of upside down. People will still think you're smart. And I was laughing because that's what it's come to. You know what I mean? But you're so right about reading actual books rather than just being infotained to death, and here we are, on this podcast. I mean, I resemble that remark, and hopefully we can inform while we entertain, but I really do think there are so many factors that are conspiring to make us all as men nuts. The first step to me, Justin, is just to wake up and realize it's being done unto us and stop being victims and take over our own lives and do these simple things we've been talking about. What do you think?
I think it's a great first step. I think, realizing there's a problem is the first step to overcoming the problem, right? And even the simple awareness of it, though, can lead to simple changes, like, putting down the phone maybe an extra hour every day until you're kind of back to like a baseline of like, all right, maybe you do use your phone like when you go to the bathroom a couple times a day. And like it's either that or like read a newspaper, and there's not really any newspapers anymore like there used to be.
Wasted time if not.
Yeah, so it's like, all right, you want to use your phone here and there. It's like there's nothing wrong with that. Or you guys are watching a movie, like you and your wife are laying down watching TV. Like that's great. You guys are bonding and hanging out. But it's like it's just all the extra time where it's like there's so many hours a day that we have. There's like 14, 16 hours of like waking actual practical time that we can be implementing into like work or improving ourselves. And if you're not,
God forbid, play.
Yeah, exactly. God forbid going out and playing whatever sport, tennis, or I love tennis personally, playing billiards with your friends or whatever, pick up basketball. It's like going out and actually doing that an hour or two a day is like one of the best things you can possibly do. But then the rest of the hours, like if you catch yourself, you just like have this like awareness the next few days of like how much you're actually wasting on your phone, just like screwing around, doing nothing productive. It's mind blowing. And then you realize too, I don't know if you had this realization too, Scott, but I've had it many times where at the end of like watching like these stupid clips on like YouTube or whatever, I'm like, these videos all sucked. I kind of just wasted like a couple hours, and I'll usually do it. I usually will watch them in the background while I'm like making like my celery juice or whatever, like my breakfast in the morning. So I don't really actively pay attention to them, but sometimes if there's like a good podcast or whatever, I'll like be glued on it. But there's been many times where I'll like think to myself after like a couple of hours of it being on, like that was just like, why did I even watch this shit? I could have actually like put an audiobook on or something, like learn something really knowledgeable instead of wasting my time on these stupid like creators. Not like there's anything inherently wrong with them, but I feel like they do take up so much of our time if we're not actively thinking about how non-effective or productive, non-helpful they are.
Yeah, I don't want to drop a bomb on these guys and say, hey, you know what, this is all your fault. I don't think it is. I think especially if we're younger guys and we've been raised on social media and shown all these examples that are unattainable, and meanwhile it's been sort of okay to descend into being a soy boy and not having a whole lot of ambition and not being all that masculine at all and sort of being afraid of being masculine because after all, that's toxic. I really can't blame guys for that, but you know what? That doesn't mean you're a victim and you're powerless either. You can gain awareness, if from nothing else other than this conversation between you and me today, Justin, and wake up and do something about it. And I think the other part is to realize, if you do something about it, if you take control of your physical health, if you give up alcohol for 72 blessed hours and just see how you feel, for example, and you start thinking about who you are. What am I really good at? I don't really have to be this superhero character to be worth something as a man. I just have to carry my 1/8 billionth of weight. You know what I mean? I think it'll have a healing effect. I agree with you on that. And I think that is the first step. And I think that's a suitable takeaway for this entire conversation. His name is Justin Stenstrom. You can go visit him at EliteManMagazine.com and indeed the Elite Man podcast, when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/elite man. That's where you'll go, where you can check out all of Justin's stuff. Justin Stenstrom, thank you so much for joining us again, man. It's been too long, and I'm glad you're back.
Thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate it, man. A great conversation. I had fun.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one that's of immense value to a lot of guys out there. And by the way, guys, this doesn't make you less of a man for needing to hear this. If anything, you'll be more of a man when you do something about it. You'll be way ahead of 9 out of 10 men out there. Go ahead and visit mountaintoppodcast.com. Download the free book, Sticking Points Solved. Get on my calendar. Talk to me for free for 25 minutes about how to be a better man, get better with women. And also, when you check out our longtime sponsors, Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine, Hero Soap Company, and the Keyport, use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 for an extra 10% off when you partake of anything from our 3 longtime sponsors. It's all there for you and more at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.